Okay, great. Oh, I'm so pleased to introduce Ms. Taneisha Pascoe Matthews, recently completing her Master's in Education, Special Education Needs and Disabilities. She is currently an Assistant Head Teacher Inclusion at Senko and Pupil Premium Lead. Her teaching career began as a mathematics and computer science teacher in Jamaica. Since moving to the United Kingdom in 2008, she continues to teach mathematics. She has been a KS3 coordinator in mathematics and a deputy for Senko. She's passionate about the care and services available to autistic children and their families. With 18 years of experience in the education sector, she recently launched a number of social media platforms to continue her autism awareness campaign under the heading Spotlight and on Autism, one of the many autism voices that she is advocating. So here we have, welcome Taneisha Pascoe Matthews to tell us about teaching students autism. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Can you just do a thumbs up if you can hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm so honored to be speaking at a Jamaican summit. I mean, from the accent, you know, I'm proper Jamaican, living in the UK now for 12 years, but everything about what I do is centered around my Jamaica. So my social media, a lot of it, it's all about Jamaican autism. So today I want to talk about autistic students and how we can support them. And I didn't, in the bio, it didn't mention that I'm a past student of the Bishop Gibson High School for Girls in Mandeville. And I also attended Church Teachers College in Mandeville. So I think there are a few of my old classmates who might be on this session today. But today I want to do my session on supporting learners with autism. It's a personal passion of mine. So I'll get right into it. It's a little bit weird presenting where I can't see the participants once I've started the slides. So I'll get straight into it. So not sure why it's starting from, let me go back. Are you able to see my presentation at the minute?
Yes, it's clear.
But I think it has started not
Press
on
the
the
back
correct
key.
slide.
Press the back key on the keyboard all the way back. Or tap on the screen.
What I'll do, I'll stop sharing and then start again just to see if that will. And then I'll go back to the presentation just to make sure that it's at the start rather than where it is at the minute. Slideshow from
beginning.
Yeah, it's for whatever reason it's starting in the middle. This is just how technology works. Okay, what? Oh, come on.
You could take it off full screen and just share your screen with it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, are you able to see the screen now?
No, share
Okay.
share the document without going into presenters mode.
Okay. Is that better?
It is. It's coming up.
Okay. So.
Okay. Yes, that's right.
Okay, good. So, so in terms of my involvement with autism and the teaching of autistic children, I know that in terms of the topic that's on it, it had said teaching students with autism, but because these are slides that I'm going to use in the UK, and in the UK, they can be a little bit touchy about how you represent autistic people. So there's a preference for calling people with autism, autistic children, autistic adults, rather than with autism. So that for the purpose of that, I've changed the title to Teaching Autistic Children. So to get into the presentation, the first thing I'd like to do is to define autism. What is autism? Now, autism is a pervasive neurodevelopmental disorder, and it's marked by a number of impairments, traditionally impairment as it relates to communication, behavior, and other sensory difficulties. Now, autism is a lifelong developmental disorder. So you're not going to grow out of autism. And even though there's a misconception that it can be cured, it can't be cured. So there are symptoms, there are characteristics, there are progress that can be made, but in terms of a cure, it cannot be cured. In terms of autism, there are three different categories that people are generally described as having autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and most recently, autism spectrum condition. There is the Asperger's syndrome, and recently they are no longer using Asperger's syndrome, and all the children and adults being diagnosed are currently having an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. Also, pervasive developmental disorder. Previously, someone displaying autistic tendencies would also be described as having PDD-NOS. So those are the main categories that autism tend to be described as. If we are going to talk about supporting children with autism, then I think it's very important that we understand a little bit of the history of autism. So autism is not a new word. In fact, the first time it was spoken of was in 1908 by Eugene. And at the time, autism was linked to children who had displayed elements of schizophrenic behaviors. In 1943, that had changed slightly when a psychiatrist, Leo Kanner, decided that he had observed in a few children that they had displayed a powerful desire of aloneness, being obsessive, insistence on persistent sameness. And at this time, a lot of people call it repetitive behavior. So that was in 1943. Moving forward, there was a German scientist, Hans, who came up with another name for autism, and it was Asperger's syndrome. I know last year there was a debate on Twitter about his involvement as it's related to the Nazis, and whether we should continue to describe autistic people with his name. And they had a bit of consultation, and at the minute they're no longer using his name, as I said, but up to last year, people were quite happy to be called someone with Asperger's syndrome. So that was 1944. Moving on to 1967, and people started looking at whether mothers were to be blamed for autism, whether they didn't show enough affection to their children, and as a result, the children may have developed autism. We have moved on from that idea to now having the autism spectrum disorder as the official name. I couldn't mention autism and the history without commenting on the MMR and the controversy around whether the MMR causes autism. I'm going to speak a little bit more about that after, because I don't know what direction to go with it, but I'll let you know about my personal experience, which I've built into this presentation. So until 2013 is when everybody now goes under the heading autism spectrum disorder. Now, why have I decided to take on this path as it relates to autism. And I can tell you that in terms of the work that I'm doing in the UK now, I do travel to different parts of the UK and I share my journey with autism. I am a mother with 2 autistic boys. One is 10, just turned 10 on Saturday, and one is going to turn 4 on Monday. My 10-year-old did not speak until he was almost 8 years old. So we had gone through the full spectrum of autism, and just a little bit of our concerns. So when he was about 1, he was quite obsessive with his behavior. He would want to go out having a water bottle all the time. He would want to go to bed with a mobile phone. Just a number of different things that he wanted to do. And we decided that we needed to get to the GP to find out exactly what was going on. And at the GP, they said, no, he's fine, he's bubbly, he's jumping about, he's a handsome boy. You have nothing to worry about. In fact, Einstein didn't speak until he was much older. But as a mother, you have that natural instinct that maybe something is not quite right. But again, you're reassured by the professionals, so you kind of move on for a little bit. And then it continued at 18 months. He wasn't talking. He appeared to be trapped in his own world. He wasn't following any instructions. And as we went back, and I can tell you that he was diagnosed with autism just before turning 3. And on my slide, I have why us, but then as a Christian, I then had to change the question to why not us? Because there are so many families out there having to deal with autism. So why not us? And that's where my faith had to take hold of the situation in terms of dealing with autism and having a positive outlook about what he can achieve and the direction that we were moving in. And the minute we started looking at celebrating all of these successes, be it small, then the autism journey got so much better. I think I shared with friends that for many years when he was nonverbal, and it's quite frustrating because they can't express themselves and so on. And a friend of mine who had her training at the Micah Teacher Training Institution, she did special ed and she's teaching special ed here. She said to me that, listen, Taneisha, your son, he's not talking, but he can learn. You need to create boundaries for him and you need to continue teaching him. So we spent a lot of time teaching him quite a bit of stuff. And when he started talking, I mean, after this presentation, you can have a look on YouTube. I now call him a champion reader. He's reading stories that I've posted on YouTube, but he didn't actually started talking until he was almost 8. My son, who is going to be 4 on Monday, he's still nonverbal. So we're having to go through what I call Autism Chapter 2. But I have a positive outlook. I'm a Christian. I'm relying on the Lord to give me all my strength. And because of how I've taken on autism, a lot of people have referred families to us to speak to them, to try and uplift them. And at times when I speak to families, I'm quite surprised because their children are more advanced than my boys, but they have gotten themselves into such a state that I sometimes get off the phone and say, oh, I wish Jaden was at this level. But that's because we have gone from knowing that we're going from 0, and in many cases from minus. I'm a maths teacher, so when you're born and you don't know how to point, how to make eye contact, how to swallow food, how to chew on food, how to write, your handwriting is poor. I mean, how to speak, how to sit for 5 minutes. And when you start doing those things, then obviously you celebrate everything. So that's part of my journey, and the reason we've decided that, I've decided that I'm gonna go from being a maths and computer science teacher to being a special ed coordinator. So SEN work for me is 24 hours because my second son doesn't sleep. That's another story. But if I move on in terms of the presentation and trying to help teachers to support learners within their school. So I'll kind of move on from our story. I'll go back to it at different points.
Before you, Miss Taneisha, before you move on, can you, you see the upper left corner, it says from beginning and from current slide. Can you click on current slide? From current slide, see if it works at the top.
Okay, so from, let's see what happens. Yeah?
Click it.
Okay, so hopefully it will work from here.
All right, good. So we're good to go from here. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So in terms of autism, if you're going to be helping learners, then you have to think about what's the impairment, because when it comes to autism, no two autistic students are the same. So there is a saying by Dr. Shore, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. I can tell you that is 100% fact, because I have two boys and they're so different. And being a SENCO, at my school, there are 5 autistic children there and they are all different. So if you're going to be helping autistic learners, you can't run off with 15 strategies that this is what I'm going to implement. You have to look at each student and decide exactly what their autism look like, what's the impairments, and what are you going to do to support those learners. So in terms of impairments, there's communication. Most autistic children are late talkers, and there is a small percentage of autistic children who never gain speech, but they can communicate. So when my son wasn't speaking, he had an iPad that he would type, I would like Lego, I would like banana chips. He's a proper Jamaican, so he likes Jamaican banana chips, which he eats every day. Every day he has a Jamaican banana chips. That's part of the autism. So communication is an area that some autistic children are affected by. Interest and information processing. So in terms of trying to plan and in terms of their understanding, so the autistic children, when you speak to them, they'll reply what you've said to them rather than having the understanding of it. So when I went to Teachers College in Jamaica and I went to Church Teachers College, we had to learn about psychology of learning. So in everything you have to think about what's the psychology behind, what's the theory. So in terms of autism, there are 3 theories. Theory of the mind, central coherence, and executive function dysfunctionality. But the one that I want to look at is the theory of the mind and how it affects autistic children. So again, you're going to a classroom situation with children with multiple deficits, multiple needs. So an autistic child might have issues with explaining one's behavior, difficulty understanding emotions. So you're upset about something, they're continuing with their life. It's not because they're uncaring, but they probably don't get it. Difficulty predicting the behavior or emotional state of others, problems understanding the perspective of others. So people sometimes think that they are a little bit uncaring, but that's not true. My son loves to give me a hug and loves to apologize all day. Lacking of understanding that behavior impacts on other people, problem with joint attention. So Jaden is focusing on his toys. He's not paying me any mind. And then earlier he was trapped in his own world. They are hearing. What I need to mention, when we were going through autism assessment, he had to do a hearing test to rule out that he wasn't answering or he wasn't able to respond because something was wrong with his hearing. So he did a hearing test and it was inconclusive because he couldn't follow instruction in terms of the music playing and him turning and looking and him. So they had to sedate and then did it at the hospital that way. Problems with differentiating fiction from fact. So you have to be very careful when you speak to autistic students. Try to be as literal as possible. Where am I? Now, in terms of how we support autistic learners, I have a photograph there, and one of it is depicting equality. And equality is something that we tend to ask for quite a bit. Why not? But for children with SEN, equality doesn't always work. Because as you can imagine, if we are doing the same for everyone, there are children who we are not making reasonable adjustment for. There are children who we are not catering for their additional needs. So as it relates to SEN, I would advocate for equity. You give each person exactly what they need. So equality is good. And in the whole grand scheme of what's going on at the minute with Black Lives Matter, which I champion, obviously, I mean, for obvious reasons. But in terms of equity for SEN children, I believe in both. But in terms of the job that I do, allowing a child to be late to school because they have to do a few rituals at home before coming in, allowing a child 5 minutes to leave a lesson because they can't navigate the crowded corridors. So I can't give equality, it has to be equity. So that's what that picture is all about. Now, in terms of supporting autistic learners, we will have to look to see what are the needs and then match those needs with what can the teacher do within the classroom. So as I said before, autism, only about 40% of autistic learners have a learning disability. Autism is a spectrum of conditions. So there are students with autism, there are autistic students who will get 10 A stars, and in the Jamaican context, 10 grade 1s. But the difficulty that they have is to be in a crowded room, striking up a conversation, and so that's their need. So not all autistic learners find learning difficult. So in terms of the support that needs to be put in place for these students, it has to match their autism. So looking at what the needs might be, not be able to communicate effectively, have difficulties with empathy, and insufficient use of communicative gestures and other nonverbal communication. If there are any Bishop Gibson High School adults in the room, when I went to Bishop's, I had difficulty with my speech and I had a really bad lisp. Even now, I can't pronounce TH or S. This, I don't know. So I have a problem pronouncing words. And even doing this presentation, this is way out of my comfort zone. But the reason I've started this is, again, inspiration from my own son, because I've learned, because you can't speak doesn't mean you don't have something to say. Because you have poor grammar like me at times, because you have a language difficulty, because you can't pronounce words, it doesn't mean you don't have something to say. And as a mother in the SEN world, and I want to be an advocate, I've had to get over the fact that my language might not be pure, my speech might not be the thing, but guess what? I have a message, so I'm here. So autistic children might have issues with the way they pronounce words, understanding language. So as a teacher, how do you cater for that? So in terms of strategies, use my name when giving out instructions. As I say, they can be daydreaming. So Taneisha, what is 2 plus 5. If I just say 2 plus 5, nothing to do with me, I'm getting on with my life, probably doodling or something. But if you've called my name, then that alerts me to get ready to answer. Let me present in small group when the class have to give presentations. Again, because of, some autistic children find it difficult to be part of large group settings, and the level of anxiety that some of these learners tend to have, it makes them ill. There are quite a bit of autistic children who are classified as school refusers. At times we tend not to do that in the UK if it's based on a medical, if the child has been to a counselor, a psychiatrist, and if the autism is keeping them at home, then we don't call them school refusers, because they're not refusing, but they are unable to, because the environment that they have to be part of, they find that environment to be really, really difficult. So they're not refusing by choice. It's the autism that's causing that. In terms of other strategies that you can use, check before you read my work out to the class. Appreciate I'm not being rude if I cannot look directly at you if we have a conversation. My 10-year-old, he doesn't make eye contact. My 4-year-old, he is looking you bang on like he's staring at you all the time. But my 10-year-old, he doesn't do eye contact, and I don't force him. He has come such a long way. I think he's like a celebrity on my Facebook, and so many people are so happy for him and his journey. So I am not going to be forcing him to be making eye contact. Give me extra time to calm down if I am getting frustrated. As I said, anxiety, meltdowns, tantrum. I currently do a podcast on Sundays. I have no business doing any sort of radio program, but as I said, I have something to say, so I'm going ahead and saying it. I spoke about what was the last point there? I think I've lost. Give me extra time to calm down. Yeah. So meltdowns and tantrums. If a child with autism, you see them in the streets, in a mall, they're on the ground there, and you think, oh, badly behaved, tantrum. A child with autism who has responded to the environment is having a meltdown rather than a tantrum. A tantrum would suggest a bad behavior. A meltdown is a reaction to sensory need that it might be overwhelming. They're affected by sound, smell, and I'll get into that. There are children at my school who can't have lunch in the canteen because of the smell. So they have to have lunch in a classroom. So going out in a mall where they have the food court and all that stuff can trigger certain reactions from autistic children. Can become frustrated easily and cannot communicate to staff. Find social situation, they're a little bit anxious about it. Find it difficult when it's noisy. So my son had a noise cancelling headphone that he had to wear in a mainstream classroom for about 3 years. And again, that's going to affect him getting all the information within the classroom, but also it helps him to be there because he can't function in a noisy environment. So he has a one-to-one teacher with him all the time, who then spend time to explain what he may have missed from the teacher. It has, why is it, let's see. It's been a little bit tricky in terms of, I'll try and share it again. Find it difficult to read and write, struggle to understand instructions. So these are just some of the areas that children with autism may struggle with. After this session, I am happy to send the presentation if people need the presentation. Let's see if I can share again from current slide. Now, if a child with autism struggles with learning, what are some of the strategies that we can use? So you break down tasks into smallest chunks. You give extra time to consider questions. You repeat information in different ways. A few years ago, I did a training about communicating with children who have language comprehension difficulties. And they say, give instruction in the order that you want something to be done. So at the end of the lesson, you don't necessarily say, you're gonna go to lunch after you pack up, because the first thing they're hearing is going to lunch. So it's stand behind your chair, pack your stuff up, stand behind your chair, and then you're gonna go to lunch. And that way, it's within the autism community, especially in early years, a lot of those students have these the communication board, and they do then, next, and after. And my son tends to speak like that. Mommy, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that, next I'm going to do this. And this is something that he has learned from school. So children with communication difficulties, speak to them in the order that you need them to carry out a particular task. Give extra time to consider questions, repeat information in different ways, physically demonstrate tasks. So these are some of the strategies that you can use when supporting autistic learners. They might struggle to read aloud in class for obvious reasons. When my son started talking, he did not speak in normal tone. He spoke using a phonetic alphabet sound. So in the UK, they learn the alphabet not A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They learn it abacada. I don't even know it, but that's how. So when he started learning to speak, if he was saying Bible, he would say big L, and I knew he was talking about Bible, but because of the way he learned phonics, he's now a natural reader. So whatever I present in front of him that's age appropriate, he can read it naturally because he knows the sounds, that the combination of letters that they make. So he is a natural reader now at 10 and can spell bigger words than I can. As I said, I have my own SEN and my own difficulties. Maybe I'm on the spectrum. I think I could be. I did art, physics, computer science, maths. I like just practical stuff when I was doing my CXCs in Jamaica. It has to be black and white, wrong or right, practical RT numbers. That was my kind of stuff. Now, moving on with the presentation. Now, one of the things last year when I was doing my master's, I did a research in the UK looking at what sort of reasonable adjustments can school make that's not going to cost them anything, just to help autistic learners to settle within the school system. So if a child is coming from primary school or nursery to primary school, it's very important that the transition work that's done, that the school that they're going to will visit the school they're coming from, so they get information to understand the learner. So you've been proactive rather than reactive. So they come in, they're failing, you think, okay, where did we go wrong? Or this happened in the previous school. Well, we can correct that by finding out exactly what we need to do from day one. So what we tend to do is to find out what happened before, and then make sure that day one we are ready for that student. The student might have an emotional keyring because they might be a little bit too shy to speak to new people. So they can say, this is how I'm feeling. And it's on a keyring that they can present to staff and other adults. I spoke about this before. Autistic learners tend to not be able to cue, and not all of them. So just few autistic learners, they can't cue, and also they have issues in crowded corridors. So what we do at my school is to dismiss them 5 minutes early, and they're at the front of the lunch queue to get their their lunch and to go off because they can't stay there. And I found out that there was a student at my school who didn't go to the canteen for a full year because the canteen was too crowded. So that was, we kind of solved that problem. When I'm traveling, I travel with a letter from my GP. So at the airport, I don't need to buy the expensive ticket to board first. I present the letter that my boys are autistic, and the airline will get me through security and immigration, and also we get a chance to board first when we're traveling. The same will happen if we go to the GP here and so on. And the reason for that is, if you observe my son and I in a situation like that, he wants to go on the floor, he's doing all, he can't queue, he's going in front of people, I'm constantly apologizing, I'm really sorry, he's autistic. So just to prevent all of that, they have certain things in place so that we can prevent that whole scenario. Earlier last year, I went to the hospital for an appointment with my youngest son, and honestly, when he was finished with me in that waiting room, I didn't have strength to continue, and they did pick up halfway through and offered me a room with toys so that I could just go sit, relax, and he could be jumping off the bed and he could be running about because they have this unlimited energy. So this makes 5 minutes early, and that will help. I mean, it doesn't cost anything and it doesn't affect the other children. So we can make that reasonable adjustment. Timetable with at least one student with autism because they have difficulty making friends, and therefore we could create a partnership there. Provide timeout cards, offer help in homework club, lunchtime club. I started at this school 2017, and I run a lunchtime club, and I'm in the lunchtime club every day because, as you can imagine, autistic kids are at risk of being bullied because we live in a big, cruel world. Most of us try to do the right thing, but some of us do find it funny to think that other people might be weird or whatever. So it gives us strength. I don't know what it is. So autistic children in my school, they have the option of being in a calm area at lunchtime, away from anything. But bullying is not common at my school, but the provision is there. And sometimes it's too noisy outside and they need to be somewhere where it's quiet. Ensure that staff has the training that they need, and ensure that there's a key person or an advocate within school that they can go and speak to. Create a one-page profile, create a document that can be passed on to all the adults working with the young person so they know exactly what the needs are. Extra time for exam, open door policies with parents. Now, parents have unique information. I can tell you, when I learned that I was going to be in an autism world, I started reading everything on Google. And then I decided I'm going to do a master's degree in SEN. And just whatever autism information was out there, I was going to get it. And many parents, they're doing the same. So use the parents to your advantage because they know their children and they're doing their own research and they're practicing some of these interventions at home. So I would say definitely, speak to parents about what needs to be done. In terms of intervention, ABA, which is very much controversial, there are people who think it makes kids robotic. So it's cruel because you have them doing the same thing 20 times. And for me, we haven't done any ABA. We did something totally different based on what I learned in Teachers College. So you have a task, and if you do well at it, you're rewarded. And you keep repeating so you get that expected behavior. If it's being rewarded, then okay, then there's a possibility that it's going to be repeated. In terms of intervention, assistive technology. So when my son couldn't speak. He went to school with an iPad because the staff didn't know sign language, and even though he was learning sign language from the TV, the staff couldn't communicate with him because they didn't know it. So I went and I bought this software and an iPad. The whole thing came to about £500, and he was able to type. I need to go to the toilet. That's what they call it here, bathroom. I need my lunch. So and then he would play it, and the sound would come out. So that was what he used to communicate. Before using that, he used picture exchange system, PEX. So he had 5 cards, and it would be in a folder, and he would take out one, show me it has banana chips in it. I want my banana chips. Or he would show me, and it might be something else that he needs. So it's a picture exchange system. It's used a lot in early years. And social stories I have, there's not a full intervention, but it's used a lot for autistic children who engage in inappropriate behaviors. Then we draw these little cartoons to say, my name is Jaden. I can't go in the girls' toilet. Jaden should not go to the girls' toilet, or something to that. Or it might mean that they're putting their hands in their trousers all the time in the class, and you try to write social stories. Again, I share some of this on my Facebook page, one of many autism voices. And I can always email to participants. So you can do a little bit of a Google search to find out about social stories. I'm looking at the time because I don't want to go over. These are some apps that highly recommended for autistic children. This one we use Prolo to Go. That's the one that he had used for communicating. Starfall ABC. My youngest son is using that. He's learning the ABC. He's not yet talking. I don't know yet what he knows because he's not responding to instructions yet. So I don't know what he knows, but if he is anything going to be like my oldest son, when he started talking, it just all came out. So in the meantime, he's learning the colors, he's learning the numbers, he's doing all that stuff, and there's some really good apps out there that you can use for that. There's some recommended websites here. Lots of information. The one at the bottom, Autism Education Trust. There's a lot there that you can use to do audit of your setting, and then to look at what are some of the interventions that can be put in place. It's a very good website. And as I'm winding down, I'm leaving you with 3 phrases. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, Dr. Stephen Shore. So you must treat autistic learners as individuals, and you have to find out exactly what their autism looks like. It might be a learning disability, it might be social skills, it might be sensory processing disorders. They're not all low ability students, so just bear that in mind. They're not all nonverbal. And another distinction, nonverbal autistic children are not necessarily intellectually challenged. So they can write a book. They can't speak, but they could write a book, write poems and so on. So there's a number of stuff that they can do. So don't judge by the type, get to really know them and speak to family. Inclusion is not just about going into a mainstream school. So there's a saying, inclusion is diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being invited to dance while you're there. So a lot of people talk about being diverse, and we have you there, but do you have a voice? Can I participate? Am I useful? I'm at the mainstream school, but am I valued? Am I just there as an add-on? Really, that person needs to feel like this is my place, this is my home. That's inclusion. Parents have unique knowledge of their children's needs, strength, interests, and current and future goals, and are their child's first teacher, supporter, advocate, and voice. to the outside world. So please use your parent. And that's it. Thank you for listening. And I do appreciate you being here. And I'm absolutely honored to be presenting to my Jamaicans.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Taneisha Pascoe Matthews. Thank you so much. Based on the chat, we have had quite a few positives coming out of it. Some people said that this is very interesting. First time they are tuning in so much to autism. So I think you shed quite a bit of light on that. And they're grateful. People are grateful. We have a few questions that we want you to clear up before you exit. And just so you know, guys, everybody in the chat, we will provide these recorded presentations on our website on JDTAN.org. So don't worry, don't fret, do not go wondering what's going to happen next. You will go to JDTAN.org somewhere around now and this Saturday, Sunday, when we have time to upload all everything. You have resources coming. Okay, so one of the questions that we would like to start off with is, I think you've been over it a little bit, but if you want to repeat and add to it, how could we cater for autistic students in a general ed classroom?
In terms of a general ed, which is what in terms of what's recommended, they recommend that autistic children are included. Again, it starts with a conversation with parents. It starts with a conversation with the professionals working with that student. And whether I'm not sure how the United States system is there a SENCO. You have to find out what are the needs, what are the specific needs. And then within the classroom, without disrupting the learning of others, without impinging on their education, how can we then cater for these needs? Some of the arrangements that I've spoken about, if it is a learning disability, ensure that the student can access the learning, so scaffolding, differentiating, is there an additional adult there working with the child? If it's a child that's having all these outbursts, so there were points where my son couldn't sit for 5 minutes, so his desk was close to the door. And so it gave the students the opportunity to get on with their learning, but also he was able to be out of the classroom every 10 minutes for 2 minutes or so. He had a bit of a time to go walk about and then to get back. It means that he's accessing mainstream, but the other children are not put at a disadvantage, because inclusion, say you include everybody at whatever cost. That's not inclusion. It's not at whatever cost. It's, I'm going to include a child, I'm going to cater for their needs, and I'm going to look at what's going to work for that child, but work for the class in general. So you have to look at what is the need. Is it learning? Okay, well, I'm going to break the learning down. Is it social skills? And they don't like answering questions. Well, I'm going to make sure that I'm not asking them questions in front of the class. I'm not putting them in big groups. So it depends on what the autism is.
Okay. All right, there's another one, and I'm going to go to, let me go to the people who are raising their hands first before I read this other one. Miss Paulette Reed, I'm going to unmute you, ask you to unmute. I don't know if you have a question or a comment. You can unmute and ask your question, or if you want to make a comment. Go ahead, please. Miss Reed, you're live.
My question is, good afternoon, everyone.
Yes.
There are times there are parents who are in denial, even though sometimes the symptoms are so, it is so obvious, and there are parents who are still in denial in having their children being assessed. As a teacher, how do you go about encouraging that parent to do so?
what I would say, it's very hard to encourage parents to get the assessment. What you tend to do is to plant the seed. So never refer to it as autism. Focus on what you've observed. To say, well, I've observed that your son finds it difficult to remain seated for 5 minutes. I've observed that when I speak to your child, so it might not be a boy, that I have to repeat the instruction. So kind of drilling all the what you've observed in terms of needs. Some parents, they think it's offensive to even think that my child is disabled. So to avoid any sort of conflict. But as a teacher, the teacher must cater for a child learning needs. So even without a diagnosis, there might be friends who would have observed. So as a professional, you plant the seeds about what you've observed, but don't try to name it. Because I've had cases where we've put a child on the SCN register, and here you should actually get permission first. And they were not happy that we've taken this step. So what we've had to do is to still provide the correct education for the child, but anything to do with additional support outside of that normal classroom, we had to get permission for. So as a teacher, plan to support the student within the class and give the child what they need, but anything additional, it's going to be up to the parents. Plant the seed and see what happens. It's a particular difficulty even within our community within the UK because of labels and because of stigma. So, and that's why I kind of do the work that I do to say, guess what? These are beautiful children. We can't be up in our feelings. The diagnosis is not about us, and we need to do what's right by them and get on with the business of supporting them as parents, rather than saying, oh, my child has autism, or it's not about you. Move on from that for the parent and actually support your child and do the right thing. But I know what you mean, because it's something that I'm dealing with sometimes with parents who are of my background.
Yeah. So there's another question here. I think it's London-based. It's Abigail. Abigail Thompson presented yesterday. She wants to collaborate with you in London. She's asking if the homework club will be London-wide initiative, and if she can collaborate with you. But that's a given. You know, but is it London? Talk some more about the homework club.
Well, in terms of the homework club, at this point, it is school specific, but I know that I have a friend who is in Sheffield, and he runs like an after school program with students from different schools. But in terms of what I do at the minute, it's specific to my school. But I, for the last 2 years, wanted to do a Lego club on Saturdays. Because it helps students to socialize, and it would be that it's a Lego club for autistic kids and siblings. So we're not only having autistic students there. So what I didn't mention in the presentation is that my youngest son, who is going to be 4 on Monday, he goes to 2 schools. So he goes to a specialist school from 9 to 12, and he goes to a normal, typical school in the afternoon, because the interactions that they get from the typical surrounding, that in itself is an intervention. But these children need targeted support, intense intervention to start. So he goes to a special school in the morning and a mainstream school in the afternoon. And that's why my kids inspire me, because they're having to do so much more than the ordinary, just to do ordinary things. So definitely I'd love to collaborate with Abigail.
Yeah, she's in our presenters group, so yes. All right, there is another, where is the other one? I think she lowered her hands. Guys, if you have questions or comments, you can raise your hand in the in Zoom, so that we can take your perspective or your questions, okay? And Miss Taneisha Pascoe Matthews, the information will be available on JDTAN.org. That's JDTAN.org. JDTAN.org, for those of us who are asking in the chat. There's one other person here. I'm going to unmute you in a little while. Here you go. Mr. Henry. Mr. Henry, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
It's actually a Mrs. Henry.
Oh, Mrs. Henry. I saw Robert on there.
That's right. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. What I wanted to know, we had an autistic child. I'm at an infant school. This is in Jamaica. And the child kept on coming out of the class, running up all over the place. It was just uncontrollable. And some teachers found it difficult to embrace that behavior. I didn't understand much in terms of how to control the child, because this was actually my first experience as an administrator with an autistic child. So my question is it okay to allow them that freedom to roam and be up and about, or as some teachers are saying, we should seek often to keep that child conformed, quote unquote conformed, and maybe they will eventually learn that that is the better behavior that they should practice. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. Learning should cause a change in behavior. So you want the child to not be continuing to doing the same thing all the time. So I had to buy a weighted jacket. So I did an episode 2 weeks ago about sensory needs and the need to be always up and jumping. So I have a trampoline, so that need that they might have to be jumping up and down, that they can still do that. And they've recommended them doing jumping jacks and then getting back into the classroom because they need to be there. So maybe having one of those egg timers to say, you are sitting here for 10 minutes. And when that's finished, then you can go out for 5 minutes. But there has to be a point where they're learning and the behavior is changing slightly, not by force and not by unreasonable target to say, you're doing half an hour, that's that. So in small increments, you're doing 7 minutes now for this week. Next week, you're doing 15 minutes. And whether a weighted, my son used to wear a weighted jacket. It helped to keep him seated. They have weighted mats that you can put on the lap. So stuff like that can help. I mean, these are all the aids. I'm telling you, these children, they have a number of stuff that they're having to deal with. But that was a concern for my son, his attention span and sitting. But now he's in mainstream, fully seated 5 hours per day. But they didn't achieve that by allowing him to be out of the lesson. He had to return. So it's a reward. 10 minutes, 5 minutes out. 17 minutes and gradually change, but not starting out with it being unrealistic.
Okay, all right, moving along. Thank you so much. Another person have a question here, Miss Robinson. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. Ms. Pascoe, let me commend you on a very excellent presentation. I just wanted I just wanted to ask Dr. Dice, will the recordings be available also, or just the presentation?
Yes, the recordings will be available on our website. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the presentations, we have the presentations as well, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Kirk, you can ask your question, unmute yourself, ask your question, please. Just unmute and ask. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just wondering, can a shadow, can teachers be trained to be shadows? Because I went to a prep school in which I saw some shadows that were there to assist the students. Not hearing me? Okay, sorry.
No, we're hearing you clearly, but we don't understand what you mean by shadow.
All right, a shadow is a person who will be there with a child. So while the teacher is teaching, the shadow will be there to assist, ensure. Yes.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if like would there have some courses in which teachers themselves can go and actually train to be shadows, so that way we have a child in the class who's autistic, we understand what to do, how to go about doing teaching the child.
Yeah, and that seems to be a not just a Jamaican issue, but even in the UK, where teachers, when I did a survey last year, didn't feel they had enough training during the teacher preparation course. So that needs to change at the teachers college level. All teachers are teachers of numeracy, literacy, and now we know SCN. So when I did my teacher training, I did psychology of learning, I did the assessment side of it. So now maybe with autism being so common, even with my year group from Bishop Gibson High School, there are a number of us within that year group with children with autism. So it is, everybody now might know somebody. So within teacher training, they should be offering that. But let's say they're not offering it. There are a number of online, well, here in the UK, and maybe I need to offer something for free in Jamaica, set up a webinar that I can put online and teachers can have access to it so that they can have that training. But yeah, teachers should be having autism training, because there are a number of children now with autism who needs to be in the mainstream school. Where you can get that training from a Jamaican standpoint, I'm not quite sure, but that's something that I would want to find out myself, whether the special ed schools, so I know that in Mandeville there's a School of Hope in Woodlawn, whether those teachers there could go into mainstream. I don't want to say anything that's inappropriate, because mainstream teachers might feel, oh, well, we have the training and we don't necessarily want someone to come in. But it's finding the solution to the issue that you said. Yeah, teachers should be having that training, and that's something that I would even like to be able to contribute to in whatever way I can.
Okay. All right, let's go a little quickly because we have a few people, so see if we can get them in before the next presentation. One person asked if there's anything that can cause a child, based on your research, if there's anything that can cause a child to be born with autism on it, or the spectrum of autism.
Yeah, that's where the problem is, and all the controversy as it relates to MMR. Because a lot of people feel that children are actually born with autism. I'm thinking more 70% that they were born with autism. I have 2 children with autism. My oldest son had the MMR vaccine. My youngest son, he has not been given the MMR vaccine, but he has autism. And the reason I didn't give him the MMR, and he should have had it from age 1. He's going to be 4 shortly, and I haven't, because I wanted to do that kind of informal research, whether it is that may have contributed to my oldest son. And then by the time I was ready for him to have the MMR, I decided, we then found out that he had multiple allergies and that he could not just go to the GP to have the vaccination, because of lots of vaccination have eggs and he's allergic to egg and so on. But there's a theory that it's linked to the gut and then it goes to the brain. So there's to do with that biological aspect, whether it might be in the family. We have 2 boys with autism. I don't think I did anything wrong during pregnancy. So the answer to that is, I don't know, because even the professionals, they don't know, but a lot of people think that you're born with it.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. Miss Gay Price, I'm gonna unmute you and you ask your question quickly.
Good afternoon, everyone. Someone made mention of a vaccine. Could you please speak to that?
But there's a controversy out there that says that autistic people are getting autism from the MMR. And the reason they made the link, parents tend to notice that there is something not quite right in terms of the development right around 18 months, and that's when they tend to administer the MMR vaccine. So whether it's just a coincidence, I'm not sure. And then a doctor came out with a documentary to say, yes, it is linked to autism. Thinking about COVID, and the reason I'm on the fence with it, and I don't know, thinking about COVID, there are lots of people who have the COVID and they don't even know, so it doesn't affect them in that way. So if you're giving the vaccine and it doesn't affect 99% of children, but it triggers the autism, this is very controversial. I don't know. These are some of the thinking around it, that MMR might be triggering autism in people who have the autistic tendencies. So whether I should mention, ganja, marijuana, people have said, if you smoke it once, you'll know whether you can continue to smoke it. And then for some people, they might smoke it once and they know it's not for me because it triggers schizophrenia within me. It was suppressed, but no, this is the reaction. So as it relates to MMR, there's nothing definitive to say it doesn't cause it, but there's nothing to say that it is causing autism. So the verdict is still out on that one. It's very controversial to think either way.
Okay, all right, last one and then we'll move on. If you didn't get to put in your question now verbally, you can post it in the chat. We will answer those questions and send them out to you or put them on the Facebook, not the Facebook, the website. I'm gonna ask one other person here. Anderson Leon, Miss Jennifer Anderson Leon. That's the last person here. Go ahead, please. You have my grandfather's last name.
Okay. Good afternoon. It's the first time hearing about the shadow. I used to work as a trained guidance counselor. I used to work as a teacher's aide to an autistic child. Now, in the classroom, I do believe teachers need to have these requisite skills because you have to be able to keep the child calm. You have to realize what are the triggers and try to help the child to avoid them. So I really do think we need to have these things done in our tertiary training institutions.
And I agree with that 100%. And then it's the reason I've started all these platforms. So from a UK standpoint, I'm on Twitter at @Mel_Pascoe, and I have over 4,000 people there, and I'm an autism advocate there. And with the one of many autism voices, I have a number of Jamaican teachers who follow that page, because a lot of my friends, these are friendships that I've developed at Church Teachers College and other teachers. So again, I'm feeding information to those teachers. So I do believe that autism training should be part of the teacher training. So 100% with you on that.
Okay. All right. Everyone, please put your questions or comments in the chat. We really appreciate it, and we'll get to those at some point before this boils down by this weekend. Okay.